So I'd love you all to get used to pop in the chat box. I know we're all Zoomed experts now, but I want to hear, one, whether you can hear me, and two, where you're calling in from. Rod, you're probably calling in from WA. Welcome. So let me know whether you can hear me loud and proud. And the other thing I'd love to hear from everybody is, can you let me know why you've attended this session today, or alternatively, what you're hoping to get out of it? We've got a jam-packed session planned for you today, and lots of fabulous content, but I want to make sure that we're hitting what you need. So please do pop that in the chat box. Welcome, Fran. Lovely to see you here. Hi, Anna. Okay, let me see if I can see what's happening in the chat box. I can see lots of people are getting in there now. Let's have a look at the chat. Sometimes when you're driving and doing this, it's all a bit too much. Welcome, Yvonne's in Sydney. David's here on, I can never pronounce it, Canucci Mudlow, I think it is, David. WA, welcome. And everyone else, fantastic. Listening on my phone, that's absolutely fine. Love you to put in the chat box what you're hoping to get out of this session. You know, we've got a lot of experts from a lot of different areas. I'm really keen to make sure that we're giving you value. Hi, Aisha. Welcome, Emma. Lovely to see you here, Emma. Hello, Helen. Marnie, Patricia, Rebecca, loads of people joining. Welcome, welcome. So I'm on the Northern Beaches. Where are you guys calling in from? Just jump into my chat box. Excellent. Oh, Helen's in lockdown, Melbourne. Guess, yeah, I can imagine, Helen, that that is an amazing situation, mental health. I was talking to one of the partners at one of the big four, and she has a lot of young people on her team, and she was saying a lot of them live on their own and they're finding it particularly difficult. So welcome, Kate from GK. Lovely to see you on this. Wow, Ohio. Well, you have definitely come the furthest, Aisha. We're really thrilled to have you here. Love to hear why you've joined us today. Welcome. Okay, great. We're just going to give a couple more minutes to get some of our extra people on. Susan's joined. Stephen Ferns, welcome. So we're just popping in why we've attended today, if you're interested and comfortable doing that. And then we will kick off in a minute or two. I can just see lots of people still being admitted. Caroline is my partner in crime. She's co-piloting this and will be managing the chat box and all of your questions. So there's Caroline, so you can see her there.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. Hi, Fiona. Let me check the chat box and see who else. Yes, Caroline, can you have Graeme activate his camera, please? Okay, all right. So Anna says, got a team in the UK, US, Melbourne and India. So all various levels of lockdown. That must be really hard. So keen to hear more about supporting this team's mental health. Practical steps, you know, it's really, if you think about it, a couple of years ago, we didn't speak about mental health much, and now we're all speaking about it, which is great from an awareness perspective. But now we need to know practically, how can we help, knowing we're in a really tough position that we've not been in before. So we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, guys. And I would encourage you to keep your questions coming. We will hold Q&A to the end, just because it's much easier to manage it that way. But please do comment, get involved, and answer your questions. So without further ado, I think we might kick off. We are recording, so anyone who arrives late will be able to jump in, and I'll have Caroline manage the chat box while I focus on our slides and hosting today. So welcome, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for coming along today. And I think it's even more fabulous that you're here, because we're actually in the middle of Mental Health Week. That runs in New South Wales all month, I believe. Graeme was sharing with me earlier. But from a country perspective, Australia's perspective today, it is Mental Health Week. I am thrilled to be working with my co-presenters today, and I'm going to introduce you to them in a minute. But before I do that, I am your host today. My name's Natasha Hawker. I am an employee expert. I specialize, and my team specializes in helping small to medium businesses create exceptional business performance through their people. Think employee relations, policies, recruitment and terminations. As you can imagine, at the moment, we're doing a lot in that restructure and redundancy space. We're great at helping people who have limited time, money and patience hire great people, and just as importantly, if they have to exit in these really tough times. Now, we're shortly going to be hearing from the amazing Graeme Cowan, and I am going to read you a little bit about him, who is the author of the best-selling Back to the Brink, from the Brink book series. He is also a board director of RUOK, and over the last 5 years, he's helped thousands of leaders and teams be more caring, mentally healthy and growth orientated. He is a regular media commentator on workplace resilience in volatile times. Welcome, Graeme. We're thrilled to have you here. And I know, having seen your slides, you got lots of value to share with our listeners today. And finally, Jamie Hermes, who is a very accomplished HR professional with extensive experience, particularly in the tech industry and professional services. What I love about Jamie is he's really passionate about helping and partnering with business leaders to implement programs that drive the strategic imperatives of a business. Currently, Jamie is ELMO's HR business partner, and he has been absolutely instrumental. He has been at the coalface of implementing ELMO's response to COVID-19. And I think he's going to share with you some really insightful ways that ELMO have done this. And I know Graeme was really impressed. But he also focuses on the well-being and the continued engagement of the Elmonian, hopefully I've said that correctly, community. So we have a jam-packed, action, fast-paced session today to pack as much value in for you. And I want to let you know a couple of things, because I have done hundreds and hundreds of these. The best value from these sessions comes at the end in the Q&A, when you get to ask whatever you want to of our panelists. I would encourage you to switch your mobile off, lean in, get involved in the chat box, and the Q&A. That's not what you want when you're about to do a webinar. But I'm also going to let you know, we've got some great prizes today. Our first prize is we're going to be giving away a copy of Graeme's book, Back from the Brink 2, for the best questions. And I have to say, I have actually read this book and it is excellent, and I would encourage everybody to get their hands on that. And the second prize is a copy of my own book, which is called From Hire to Fire and Everything in Between. And that's for the person who's the most interactive on the chat box. There is also a special offer, which I'm not going to share yet, which will only be available to those people who hang on here right till the end. And it's worth waiting for. So please do join me in that space. So Caroline, I am going to continue on. So I'm just going to set my timer so that I make sure that we give you the value that we want to give you today. So today we've got a really important, very topical subject for discussion, which is how to revive and thrive managing health in the workplace. It can be a tough one though. You know, as I said earlier in my introduction, we didn't used to talk about this. It was just something that was seen and not heard. Now we do talk about it, and it's incredibly important that we do. Now, before I go on, I need to let you know this. This is the boring bit. The information I'm going to share is about HR. It is not about, I am not a legal advisor, I'm not a lawyer, and nor is Employee Matters. And this is not specific advice. If you need specific advice, by all means, reach out and we'd be very happy to help you. So I believe firmly, and some of you on this call will have heard me bang on about this before, but I actually believe your employees are your greatest asset, and also potentially your greatest liability, and should be treated as such. And it's absolutely critical for me, now more than ever, that people focus on their employees and building employee assets. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we do that. But if you take nothing else from this presentation this afternoon, that's what I think you need to take from it. So let me tell you how I think we build employee assets. And this has come about from dealing with hundreds and hundreds of companies over the last 9 years, but even more earlier in my career. And I think this will share something that everyone should get something out of. I'd encourage you to write this down and actually assess yourself or your business against this. At the center of everything we do, and what this is really all about, is building a business where your employees treasure your business as much as you do. But wait, it's also where you treasure your employees as your greatest asset. And when you get that sweet spot, you get 3 key outcomes. You get profit, which is about long-term building your business for future potential valuation and exit. You get growth. That growth is one of those indicators of success. And then you get sustainability. And I used to ask clients, of those 3, which would you rate 1, 2, and 3? It was always growth or profit first. Guess what it is now? It's always sustainability. Everyone is trying to work out how they're going to survive and thrive in the long term. So when you get those 3, to get those 3 outcomes, you've got 3 key ingredients: culture, performance, and risk management. So we believe performance and culture drives profit. Culture and risk management builds a sustainable business. And when you've got the risk management or governance with the high-performing team, that's where you drive your growth. Now, there are 3 key outcomes, accelerators that drive performance. You've got to hire the best. You've got to manage them to optimize your performance. So I'm going to pause here. What I'd love you to be doing is rating yourself orange, green, or red. Think it, don't blink it, don't think it. Just put down how you think you're faring in these accelerators we're going to go through. And then the last one here is measurement. What's your return on investment for the money that you spend on your employees, which for many businesses is often their highest expense. You've got to train your people to optimize their performance, also appropriate workplace behavior training, educating people here around mental health. You've got to engage. So engagement is the measure of discretionary effort. How do we build a highly engaged workforce? It's the secret to productivity, I tell you. And then the last one is well-being, which is a lot of what we're talking about today in mental health. Then we're going to talk about how you assess your risk, in this employee asset model, how you have the right policies in place, and lastly, how you exit both those employees that you maybe don't want back, but you don't want to end up getting into trouble, and also those employees that you really hope at some point they might work out the grass isn't greener on the other side, and they're happy to come back and work for you again. So that's how we build employee assets. People often ask us why we call them accelerators, and that's because how you accelerate, building out this model and creating these treasure assets of employees. So let's talk about mental health and dealing with mental health in the workplace. Oops, sorry, I've gone one slide too many there. This blew my mind when we did the research for this. According to WHO, the World Health Organization, who we hear so much from at this time, globally 264 million people across the world are suffering from depression. And many of those people also have symptoms of anxiety. And it's estimated that depression coupled with that anxiety costs the global economy $1 trillion a year. Now, while I let that take a second to sink in, that was actually pre-COVID. So my concern is that is going to be a very different space when we talk about these sort of numbers in another 12 months' time. It will come as no surprise to anyone on this call how much our life has changed, and also how much we didn't see this coming. If you'd asked me this time last year, what would you be doing in October 2020, I wouldn't have said we'd be where we are today. I think I would have been planning a trip to Europe this Christmas because we missed out last time. Now I've got no idea when we're going to be going. I did want to share with you this quote from Ian Hickey from Sydney University's Brain and Mind Centre, who's been working on complex modelling that forecasts the mental health impacts of COVID-19 across Australia. And it sums up the impact on mental health in Australia. And I think this is a really important thing to write down. 3 of the biggest risk factors have come together here: disruption of employment and people's regular lives, disruption of education, particularly for the younger people. I actually disagree with that bit. I think that's particularly for the parents that are struggling with homeschooling as well there. And then social dislocation more broadly. And the thing is that employees suffering from mental health conditions work with all of us. There are colleagues, our managers, and even our friends. And I think mental health was a significant issue for workplaces before COVID. But now with that perfect storm coming about, with the impacts of the pandemic, it's going to be an even more critical issue moving forward. So, you know, in my experience, a lot of people hadn't really dealt with people with mental health in the workplace. Those people sort of exited, they resigned, or many of them, I think, were performance managed out incorrectly. If we're really honest about it, we didn't realize it was a problem. And so I think now managers and business owners and organizations are going to be dealing with 2, 3, 4, 10 people with a mental health condition, and that's going to have ramifications for managers and businesses. So let's talk about what you need to do as a business owner and what is your responsibility. And I think it's really important for people to know, and sometimes still a surprise for people to know. So as an employer, you have a duty of care. That's a legal obligation to maintain a safe place of work. And this includes steps to protect and manage your employees' mental health as well. So manage their stress levels, manage their feelings of isolation. And I expect many of you on this call will be going, how do I do that? Well, we are going to talk about that. And you need to be very proactive about the way that you manage mental health and these obligations. And you do have an onus to try and minimize those risks or deal with those risks when they're coming up. But on the flip side of that, you do also have, you know, it doesn't cater for you to be unduly concerned about someone who's hypersensitive and unduly sensitive to, for example, performance management. People often go, can't performance manage them because they're stressed. Well, you can. It just needs to be done in a very careful, different way. So managing stress is really important, and managing the stress levels of your employees, particularly during COVID. So I wanted to share this slide with you. I think this is amazing. The source is Aon and WorkSafe. So let me just pull out a couple of key facts for you. 6% of all workers' comp claims are related to mental health. And guess what? This is pre-COVID. My guess is that that is going to triple or quadruple over the next 12, 18 months, 3 years. So that is an issue. As we see the true impact coming out. The second one here, which I wanted to draw your attention to, is mental health claims can cost, in workers' comp terms, $24,500 per claim compared to $9,000 per claim. And the weeks involved, time off, is 15.3 weeks versus 5.3 weeks. And I think what I wanted to say here is that these are quite expensive and significantly different to other claims such as RSI or a trip or a fall hazard. However, when you deal with this proactively, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute, you can reduce these. A couple of things to note here. 1 in 5 people, and if I've got you to put your hand up and we could do this discreetly, I'm sure everyone would put their hand up, but 1 in 5 people have taken a sick day for stress, but 90% of people give a different answer. They actually say they had a headache or they had a sore tummy when it's actually stress. 30% of absent days from work are actually related directly to stress. And here's the big one when we're talking about being proactive rather than reactive. Research shows that for every dollar that you invest in proactive mental health, you get an ROI of $2.30 on every dollar that you spend. My concern is, though, that many managers lack the knowledge and the experience of dealing with mental health proactively. And so I guess what I'm saying is, you know, how can you afford not to more proactively manage this as a result of where we're at? So let's talk about working from home. This pandemic meant literally overnight, we had organizations picking up their consoles and walking out the door with them to return to their homes and for that to become their new workplace. Now, there are many pros and cons of working from home. For some of the pros are you can go and put your washing out at your morning tea break. You might be able to have more time for sport. You might be able to go and see the kids play their sport if you're, depending on where you live in Australia. Obviously, for our friends in Melbourne, that is not possible. And I spoke to a bank a couple of weeks ago, and I was ringing him, and as I do, I said, "And how are you going?" And he goes, "Well, thank God you called me now, because if you called me half an hour ago," much like this lady in the screen, he said, "I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. My wife and I are working around the dining room table. We live in a 2-bedroom flat, and my 18-month-old baby was screaming her lungs out for half an hour." Now, I can tell you that guy probably wants to get back to work. You know, that is not conducive. That's highly stressful. You're trying to keep the kids quiet so that you can talk to your clients. You're fighting for room on the dining room table, and that's going to cause a whole lot of trouble. So the issue with working from home, though, is think about those people who are living on their own and aren't really engaging with anyone. You've got those feelings of isolation and lack of connection. And there's a guy who called Dr. Thomas Joyner, who's a suicidologist, and he describes the lack of connection that we had in Australia even before the pandemic. So 23% of people in the offices in Australia didn't feel like they had any sort of connection to the people in the workplace. And you can only imagine how that's going to have increased because of COVID. And I'm actually going to quote Graeme here, who's next to speak to you, but he talks about organizational workload will always be a barrier. However, those who create opportunities for employee connections, such as morning teas, celebrations for birthdays, foster a really positive culture, and that's really, really important. So at Employee Matters, we have been a remote team for 9 years. You can have morning teas, quiz nights, all of those things. The other thing I want to touch on really quickly here, because I am fast running out of time, and I think Janine Lee is on the call. Many people don't realise that there's been some fairly significant changes to WorkSafe around domestic and family violence. You also have a duty of care when it comes to looking after employees that you suspect are victims of domestic violence. And guess what? In many cases, we've just moved them home 24 hours a day with their perpetrator. Calls have gone through the roof to helplines, 1-800-RESPECT. They're coming through at midnight when their partners are asleep. So we do need to be careful of that. And there are flow-on effects to mental health, obviously as a result of being a victim of domestic and family violence. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the messages I do want you to take from here is it comes from the top in terms of developing healthy, mentally healthy workplaces. And I want you can read those yourself, but here are a couple of statistics that make it worth your while. So if you have a mentally safe workplace, here are the results: 43% greater productivity, 51% less employee turnover, and 86, this blows my mind, 86% greater creativity. We need to become the clever nation again, and we have an issue with productivity. So being mentally healthy as an organisation will help us do that. I think the main point I'd like you to take from this slide is we need to educate our managers, but also our employees, how to proactively manage their mental health. And Graeme also says, and I thought this was really pertinent, is a psychologically safe workplace is characterized by a climate of interpersonal trust and mutual respect in which people feel very comfortable being themselves and asking for help. So I think that's really important. My last slide, but one here, is so how do you create a mentally healthy workplace? One option is mental health first aid training. I am a trained mental health first responder, but it is quite expensive, and it doesn't necessarily give me the ability to help somebody who's outside my circle. The EAP program, every single person in this country should have access to EAP. I think for businesses, contact me if you want to get one set up. And last one is WeCare, and I'm going to let Graeme talk to you about WeCare, but we use WeCare at Employee Matters. It is an amazing product and opportunity to facilitate people being able to have some of these very difficult conversations. So I am going to now hand over to the amazing Graeme Cowan, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Graeme is going to be able to share his screen and go from there. Over to you, Graeme.
Thanks, Natasha, and really great introduction and really highlighting some of the issues that are involved. As Natasha mentioned, I was involved in helping to start RUOK back in 2009. And something quite amazing happened last year in November. You know, in 2009, we just had this idea, this concept. Gavin Larkin came up with the tagline, "A conversation could change a life," and we had high hopes. But we really felt that we had huge milestones last year, and one in particular was the Navy. And this shot in front of you was taken from at the HMAS Adelaide in Garden Island in Sydney. And each of these 600 sailors are about to depart overseas. Just think about that, going away for 3 months, not seeing your family around you. And you can understand it'd be very, very stressful. And what they were endeavoring to do was to launch a concept of RUOK 365. And it was made extraordinary by these two people in front of you. Gwen Chern is the widow of a serviceman who tragically lost his life to suicide. And she presented and explained the signs that she missed, that his mates missed, but then talked about some really practical ways that they could be connected with each other on the ship, but also with family, even though it's via Skype and not as regularly. And the gentleman on the right is Commodore Stephen Hughes, who's kind of a big deal in the Navy. Commodore Hughes oversees 19 ships and 4,400 personnel. And he said, Commodore Hughes said, you know, you've just heard Gwen's story and we don't want to lose anyone from the Navy family. And he used that term, Navy family. But for those of you that haven't been exposed to a mental health crisis or tried to support one, I'd just like to share a couple of other things. You know, we should do this from the Navy's, you know, care for each other. But I'd just like to remind you that this is also a capability issue. The Navy is no more or no less than hundreds of great teams. And if one person on a team is compromised, the whole team is compromised, the whole ship is compromised. So this is about capability, reaching out. And he said the second thing that we're really big into in the Navy is risk mitigation. You know, reducing risks as much as we can. Like if we have an enemy target, we'd much rather take them out at 1,000 kilometers rather than 10, and especially 1. Because at 1, there is collateral damage. And so it is with mental health. And, you know, we need to act quick. If we think someone's not going great, reach out to them. If you can't find anyone to talk to, call me. And he read out his mobile number, which I thought was pretty extraordinary for someone that oversees 4,400 personnel. But then symbolically, we went up to the deck and formed this, you know, amazing picture. And, you know, I just think the future of successful organizations is leaders like Commodore Hughes that are looking at both the care and performance dimension in organizations, care and capability, as he called it. So what are you finding most challenging about this COVID-19 crisis? Is it homeschooling? Is it being separated from your workmates? Is it all being in the one place in your home and you're driving each other nuts? I'd just like you to type into the chat box of what has particularly affected you. Just what has it been? I'll get Caroline to just read out if there's any comments there. So just type into the chat box if there's been anything that's impacted you during this period.
Socialization, we have feeling disconnected from their colleagues, missing social gatherings at work and with friends, not being able to see family, friends, feeling isolated from family and friends who are interstate and overseas, and seeing the kids' education and freedom being compromised, missing the commute, that time where you can just have your own thoughts.
Thanks, Caroline. You know, as you can see, everyone has a different one. Isolation is a common element. Social dislocation is a big element as well. And this, I think, is central to creating workplaces that value care, resilience, and growth. Like we want resilience, but it really starts with care. Self-care leads to self-resilience and self-growth. Team care leads to team resilience and team growth. And this is a really interesting slide by the Black Dog Institute, where they surveyed over 6,000 people since COVID began. And just take a moment to read those figures. So if you think your mental health has declined, you're not alone. 78% feel that their mental health has declined since COVID. 23%, almost 1 in 4, has said it declined significantly. 8% are feeling stressed by the uncertainty of the future. People are having worries on finances. So what do we do? Well, I believe that we really need to focus on a model that is really interesting to think about is that the moodometer. Now, as I went through a profound episode of depression, which lasted 5 years, and I went to see a psychiatrist, every 2 weeks for that period, and he'd always ask me to rate my mood. And one day I asked him why, and he said, well, it helps me to understand where you are, and I believe that we all should be able to manage their mood. And I said, manage your mood, haven't I got a clinical illness? And he said, you will always have a predisposition to depression, but I believe that you and everyone else should be able to learn how to manage their mood and maybe even to master it. And he was actually very close to being correct. Our mood is determined 50% by our genetics, 40% by our intentional actions, what we choose to do each day, and 10% by the events that happen in our lives. Now, I would add that that 10% is for normal changes and events, and I would certainly argue that the COVID crisis is by far not a normal event. So what do we do to have this crew care? If we consider ourselves in the middle there, we need to practice 3 things. The first is self-care. If we don't look after ourselves, we can't look after other people. Next, we have crew care. And this is having a supportive group around us in the workplace and also in our home life. And finally, red zone care. And that's having the knowledge and the skills and the comfort to be able to reach out and support someone who's going through a tough time. Now, if we have self-care and crew care, we have growth. If we have crew care and red zone care, we have resilience. And if we have red zone care and self-care, we reduce risk. So every organisation should be striving to reduce risk, build resilience and build growth. And that is about creating a culture of care. And this isn't just theory. The Gallup organisation has been researching employee engagement and discretionary effort for over 50 years. They have found that there's one statement: my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. The more people agree with that, and it's been asked 13 million times in 135 countries, the more people that strongly agree with that, the higher the profit, productivity, customer service, and employee longevity. This isn't a nice to have. This is central now to a high-performing team. Just talk briefly about the self-care, and each of these things, self-care, crew care, and red zone care, are a whole webinar in themselves, but I'll just give you a quick overview. In our self-care, there are 3 components that contribute to our well-being, our resilience, our self-care. The first is vitality. This is our physical well-being, things like exercise, good rest, good sleep. The next is intimacy. These are having supportive relationships around us, both at work and also at home. And people that have that, it's like having scaffolding. It supports you when you have a tough time or something goes wrong. And the final element is prosperity. This is our contribution well-being, and this often comes through our work, making a sense of contribution. Sometimes it's contributing to a charity or a school or a sports team. But we need all 3 of these things to really thrive and be resilient and experience growth. And we can't just be good at 2 and not 1. It's like a 3-legged stool. We have to fill up all those. So how do we know what to focus on? I've put together this self-care snapshot, and as you may see, it just adds 5 questions in each of the 3 dimensions. And it helps identify, what is your emptiest glass? What is your emptiest glass? And this might give a clue to what you would focus on if you want to create a ritual which would allow you to move ahead. The next section is crew care. And, as Natasha said, having that sense of team, that sense of belonging is incredibly important. But as a leader, you can see how critical it is but you walk the talk on well-being and care, self-care. It has a contagious effect. If you're a healthy leader, you have a much greater chance of having healthy team members and healthy team results. And there's 3 elements of a great team, and this comes from the culture code, looking at the highest performing teams in Google, in IDEO, Navy SEALs, elite sports team. Great leaders in these organizations just continue to ask themselves these 3 questions. Are we connected? And the outcome you're seeking there is people feel we belong. You know, it's a fundamental human need to feel you belong. Are we safe? And of course, this is physical safety, but for most of us, this is psychological safety. And if you haven't followed the work or the research in this area, Google spent millions to discover what made their best teams. And the #1 predictor of their best teams was high team psychological safety. This is where people are comfortable being themselves. They feel safe taking risks. They're strong interpersonal trust and respect. And finally, do we share a future? Do we share a future? So what's one way that this can happen every day? I've got a good mate. I've got a ritual every Sunday going to Cocoa Beach. And just in front of me there is my mate, Bernie, and my mate, Alistair on the right. Bernie runs a software development business, developing a cryptocurrency arbitrage system. He has team members in both the Philippines and Australia. And he has a ritual in place, which I think is fantastic. Every morning at 10:30 a.m., they have a stand-up meeting. And the first question is, each member answers this, are you okay? And if it doesn't move beyond that, it's not a good answer, they don't proceed. They also ask, is your family okay? And what are you grateful for? Is it something you're grateful for the previous day? Because gratitude is also good for our personal well-being. The second thing is, what did you get done yesterday? This is a chance for a virtual high five, celebrate little wins along the way. The third question is, what is your #1 goal for today? If you get nothing else done today, if you get this one thing done, what is it? What is it that will make the greatest input? And the fourth question is, are there any impediments to reaching my #1 goal? So, you may like to consider doing that. And if people have got questions about that, we'll cover that at the end. Red Zone Care, and I'll just move very quickly through this. And again, I'll rely more on questions coming. I surveyed 4,000 people to find out what helped best in their recovery in my 3rd book. And it came to form an acronym called I Care. So the I is how we identify who's struggling. That's usually through changes. C is for compassion, putting yourself in their shoes, asking with empathy, are you okay? A is for access experts, encourage them to seek help, whether it's an EAP line, whether it's a senior GP or calling a helpline. R is for revitalizing work. And this is the research that shows that people recover best if they are still connected with their workmates. So you might reduce workload, but staying connected is very, very good for their recovery. And the final element is exercise. Exercise boosts mood. A 20-minute brisk walk can improve our mood up to 12 hours later, according to Mayo Clinic research. And there's a poster here. You can download that for free at factorc.com.au. And also, we've been working in partnership with Natasha and Employee Matters with a product called We Care. And what this does is put in place a whole lot of tools and checklists that help you to cover these situations. A 20-minute course, then you get help sheets, posters, and just know how to respond to things going wrong. And you can purchase this at our portal here, Are You Okay? Sorry, We Care 365, or just go to factorc.com.au. And as you can see, our normal price there is $43.90, but Natasha's going to be offering a special deal for people on this call today. So having a culture of care is critical to reducing risk, building resilience, and building growth. And if you have any questions or contact please feel free to reach out. Probably LinkedIn's the best. I'm very active on there. And, that's a good place to start. But hopefully we have some questions at the end. And I will stop sharing now because our next speaker, Jamie, is about to come on. And I'll just add to what Natasha said. Jamie talks about some brilliant examples of what they did during the crisis to form a sense of community and connection. And, he can tell you how that went in the real world. So I think that I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Graeme. We're just waiting to share the screen. That's happening now.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha and Graeme, for the great webinar, and thank you for inviting me along today to speak. Hi, everyone. As Natasha mentioned, my name's Jamie. I'm the HR business partner here at ELMO. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about COVID and how we responded to maintain a sense of engagement with our people over that time. First of all, though, I'll tell you a little bit about us and our culture here at ELMO and what's important to us. We're about nurturing connections. We really value collaboration, building that real sense of community. And I may be a little bit biased, but I think we're good at engaging with our people, and we get a lot of positive feedback from that about our culture, which I just love to hear. We call ourselves Elmonians, as Natasha mentioned earlier, and we take pride in that real sense of belonging. So when COVID hit us in March, and like most businesses, we made the decision to move into isolation very quickly, not a lot of notice or lead time. Our executive team watched the situation closely. We didn't have the luxury of a drawn out planning process, but just had to move and get on with it really quickly. We have a workforce of over 400 people who are now working remotely. So we had to ask ourselves, what are our priorities and how do we continue to engage with our people? The obvious answer for us was to maintain that sense of community and connection and provide visibility from ourselves and the senior leadership team and continue the continuation of our various initiatives that we have on site in our offices. So I just want to get back to Graeme's care model for just a moment, and on reflection on how we demonstrated those three aspects over that time. I'm sure most other HR practitioners and HR teams were able to do this as well. But for us, self-care was really around mental health. We would send regular wellbeing emails to our employees, generally on a weekly basis. We also had webinars from various external providers talking about mental health, managing stress. We also had an EAP provider do a couple of presentations just to give people the resources they needed to not only look after themselves, but their families as well while they're working remotely. The bulk of what I'm going to speak about today references the crew care aspect of the model, and I'll come back to that in just one moment. But red zone care for us, of course, we had some people who were challenged and struggling over that time. But we were fortunate enough to in our community, our people did show amazing resilience. We reached out to them, we checked in with them, and as we're returning to the office now, in most of our locations, we can really see how that sense of connection held together. So going back to crew care now, the answer to how do we provide visibility, and that was simply by being present. For example, one of our regular initiatives is a CEO address, already a thing on site. We moved that online during COVID on Zoom, and we had 400 people online, so it really did feel like a community gathering. We also would record these sessions and add them to our dashboard on our in-house ELMO solution, which I'll speak a little bit more about later as well. For myself and the other senior leaders, being present also meant attending all of these online events. So the CEO addresses, the daily check-ins, the morning teas, and various others. Our aim of being present was expressing our own vulnerabilities, our feelings as people. We are human, and this led to an open dialogue, I guess, where people felt they could reach out to their managers or us in HR, and we're encouraged then to check in with each other. So how do we maintain the sense of connection? Through continuity and creation of our collective rituals. As I mentioned, we were good at doing these on site. So it was a case of acting quickly, keeping that momentum going, and getting what we could of those initiatives online. And we believe that was a factor in, the resilience that our Elmonians have shown over that time. So along with connection and communication from HR and the leadership team, we recognise the vital roles of our managers for playing in keeping the fabric of our community together. So we did our best to check in with them and make sure they're okay, as well as help them do the same for their respective teams. So just to go into a little bit more detail about some of our rituals, you can see them there up on the screen. And some of these might be something that a takeaway for some of you right now to use right away, but there were simple things like, our virtual morning teas, which were led by team leaders, and in those morning teas, they'd be prepping a quiz or a trivia or a game with charades or something. A lot of them were a lot of fun. But it just made sure that engagement and ownership was shared. It wasn't just us in HR pushing and managing that process. One of the popular activities was the Quarantini Fridays. So that is a ritual on site. We generally start our drinks on Friday afternoons about 4 p.m. But we successfully transferred this online. Everyone grabbing a drink at 4 p.m. And obviously it was one of the most popular activities. So further to this, we had a number of other internal clubs and activities which also went online, and we created a calendar for employees with Zoom links to the various activities, and we were then able to post this on our ELMO dashboard on our HRIS, and this made it easier for people to jump in if they were feeling burnt out or just needed a distraction or to get away from their desk at home, to join in and with some activity with their colleagues. It broke the isolation. Again, some of the ideas the activities we are up on the screen now, and might be worth trying if you haven't already. So how did we do it? We used our instance of ELMO, as I've spoken about already. Frankly, I can't imagine not having this system in place over that period to manage and work with employees. Obviously, I work for ELMO, so I'm going to show you how we did it in our solution. We just got over 50 people and survived 2020 on spreadsheets. I can only recommend that you put a system in place with something like ELMO. So beyond the dashboard for employees, it saves so much time for us. Having to be present, reaching out and being there was time consuming, but the time saving for automating the admin was absolutely invaluable. So the key module for our people that was accessible on our user dashboard was HR Core, which allowed our employees to update their details and managers to self-service for things like annual leave. With our dashboard, we embedded our activities calendar where employees could see what activities were happening and when they're available. We also had a recognition stream going where employees could get visibility of peer-to-peer recognition and also recognise some of their peers themselves. A big part of the HRIS was the LMS part of it. It was really around to educate our employees on COVID and being COVID safe, and using, leveraging some of these courses from our course library. But we also use the LMS to manage our policies. And as you can imagine, there were a number of policies we were running over that time, still are, to be quite honest, which we had to update frequently and distribute as quickly as possible. Onboarding has always been a critical part of what we do here. We're keen to get people inside, engaged as soon as possible. It works very well on-site, but it was a case of maintaining that while we work remotely. Having the onboarding component of our solution was great in managing the admin component, and that gave us the ability to meet with our new starters. It was on Zoom. We were able to give them that time to make that really critical social connection from the onset. And I guess the other critical part for me over that time, and again, it still is now, is having access to a survey to check in with our people. Critical for myself and the HR team to check in with our people, see how they're going, seeing what they need from us. Do they have everything at home that they need? And as I say, we're still working particularly with Melbourne, our people in Melbourne, and the broader ELMO team as well. So that's pretty much it from me. It's a very high level on some of the initiatives that we employed throughout COVID. As I mentioned, we're working with our Melbourne team. We don't know what's in store for us in 2021. Hopefully it will be less challenging, but from my perspective, we're confident that we'll continue to be able to respond quickly to support our people and maintain that sense of community. That's ELMO. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm just going to swap. Well done. I'm just going to share my screen, and apologies because I am going to have to flick through all of these, but we are now in our Q&A, and what I would like to say is I'm flicking through these as quickly as I can, and I'm about to go to our Q&A section, is that I'm very conscious this is a really important topic, and we will finish at 2, but we will continue beyond that for anyone who wants to hang about for a little bit longer to ask any other questions. So my Q&A slide will come up in a minute, and then I'm going to, there we go to the first question that we have got. And I saw one, bear with me 1 second as I just go into Q&A. I saw an excellent one about somebody saying, I'm loving working from home and I'm dreading going back to the office and resuming BAU. From Anonymous. Anonymous, you do not feel alone. And I can tell you what I'm predicting from a HR perspective is we will never go back to the way we used to, and I better put my camera on so you can see me. But we will, and if ever all of our panelists can put their cameras on so that everyone can see them, we will never go back to the way it was entirely. My view is now that we have proven overnight that we can work from home, that we will have a hybrid model, and that's going to create enormous flexibility and opportunity for a whole lot of people who maybe couldn't join the workforce to join the workforce. So questions, Caroline, I assume I'll go from the top, from Nick. How do we avoid being overbearing and patronising when discussing mental health, especially with younger employees? I'm going to throw that to you, Graeme, if you can take that question.
I think the most powerful way to show you're authentic and show things going on is people sharing stories. And, you know, you will have in your organisation people with first-hand experience. You will have in your organisation people that are supporting loved ones. And I've just seen the most remarkable change in how people discuss it when a real story is shared. And one example is I was working with an operations team from NAB in Melbourne. And of course I shared my story, but what really changed it was that and this was pre-planned, there was another person in that organisation who had his own lived experience. He really struggled for a period, it was about 10 years ago. And for him, he then took up triathlons. He'd done the Hawaiian triathlon 3 times. And when he spoke of his troubles, when he spoke of how seeking help changed, the whole meeting changed. Suddenly people were saying, well, actually, I'm not sleeping very well at the moment. People would say, I'm finding it really hard to juggle this remote working. And this was pre-COVID. So sharing those stories, I think, is the most powerful way. I did a interview just recently with Mike Schneider. He's the CEO of Bunnings. He oversees 45,000 people. Mike shared his struggles. He said their business had gone bad in the UK. He really struggled with that. He shared that his son had to miss his 21st birthday because he was based in that area. When leaders do that, it's a game changer.
Great. Thank you, Graeme. Next question is, and this is again for you, Graeme, how do we recommend introducing WeCare to larger organisations to adopt it as part of their wellbeing program?
Yeah, it actually is quite straightforward. If you have a learning management system, we can organise to put it straight on there. It can just go on there. And already we have groups like Volkswagen, Australian Stock Exchange, and aged care centres all doing that. And it can be customised. And so you can have your EAP provider. You can also have the other support that you have. So it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no, that's great. We have another question here. I've got a perspective on this, but again, Graeme, keen to get yours. And I'd also like to hear Jamie's on this. How do we encourage a team member to take professional support? And I think one is listening to them and even maybe offering to go along with them or sit with them while they make that call. I'm going to throw to Jamie first. Jamie, how have you handled that at ELMO?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I agree. It's absolutely about talking to people, listening to them, and really encouraging them to reach out. And I will always prefer EAP and really stress the benefits of doing that, the services that they provide, and what our people could possibly get out of it.
Great, Graeme. And then we'll wrap, and then we'll hang about for extra questions.
Yeah, I think. And denial is one of the most common questions that come up, denial. And in essence, I think there's a couple of things we can do. We can think about, are they closer to someone else in your organisation or your team? Can you talk with them to have that discussion with that person to encourage the help seeking? And there is nothing wrong with revisiting the question a week later. It's okay to say, look, I understand you're not ready to talk, but I'm still concerned because of these behaviours you've observed. So do you mind if I come back? And we have a remarkable video in the Are You OK YouTube channel where a boss and a person are speaking from the rail industry. But bottom line is the team member says, I wasn't ready to talk the first time, the second time, but the fourth time, I just couldn't do it anymore. So don't be afraid to revisit it.
That's a great response. Okay, guys, in the interest of time and being sensitive to everybody's time constraints, I just wanted to wrap, but we will stay about for extra questions at the end. So if this session has raised any issues for you personally, I would like to encourage you to reach out to Beyond Blue, Lifeline, or your own company's EAP program, that's Employee Assistance Program, as soon as possible. And remember, ask your teammates, your friends and their family, and your family, are you okay? Because somebody might just need that little bit of encouragement and that question. If you would like to learn more about either Graeme's products or Employee Matters or ELMO and Employee Matters, and I'm sure Graeme does the same thing as well, are offering complimentary discovery sessions where we can chat to you about our offerings, and Caroline is going to put a link in the chat box to info at Employee Matters, and we can forward that to either ELMO or Graeme as required. So let's get to the important part, because I know everyone's dying to get their hands on a copy of this book. So drum roll, please. I'm Caroline. I need you on here to tell me who has had the best question.
Well, I think the best question, I think, is Vashti. We haven't addressed her question yet. Can you please provide just, she had a couple of questions. One of them was more information about the benefits of a psychologically safe workplace.
Okay, great. All right, yep. We will address that question. You are the winner of Back to the Brink 2. What I need you to do, and same for, actually I'll tell them what I need to do after we find the winner of From Hire to Fire and everything in between, for the most interactive on the chat box this afternoon.
That is Nick. He has asked quite a few great questions. We haven't answered all of them yet. but he's definitely been the most interactive today.
Fantastic. Congratulations, Nick. What I need you guys to do is to send an email to info@Employee Matters with your address, and we will post that to you. It'll probably need to be your home address because no one works from the office anymore. I won't share that with anyone. So if you can do that ASAP, we'll get that out and about. Anyone whose questions haven't been answered, hang about, and if we don't do it after that, we will take those questions away and come back to you. Caroline's been taking some notes there. So I did say that we were going to offer something very special to our guests today. So as you know, I've been raving about Graeme's We Care product, and he was saying it was normally priced at, I think it was $49.58. As a special only for people who are on this webinar now, if you are able to send an email to Graeme through his website only till Monday at midnight, you can get that product for $21.95 per license. That's half price. That can save somebody's life. I kid you not. And we've never needed that product more than what we need it now. So I would encourage you to get on and do that. That brings us right on 2 o'clock to the formal part of the end of our session today. I appreciate it. I know everyone's zoomed out. We're thrilled you've stayed with us for as long as you have. I'd like to thank Graeme, Cowan and Jamie Hermes from ELMO for their excellent presentations. And I would encourage everyone to reach out to any of us on social media. I know all of us are very active and promote a lot of good stuff on there, and you can get access to a whole lot of good tools. Stay safe, everyone. Remember, your employees do really matter, and for those of you who want to stay on, we will continue trying to get through your questions.
And also, I'll be sending an email to everybody with everybody's contact details, all the presenters and all of the resources that have been mentioned.
Fantastic. Thanks, Caroline. All right, we will continue on with the questions. So the next question from Anonymous is, mental health matters are being evidenced in middle management. How do we broach this respectfully in a hierarchical based organisation? I think I'll take this one and then I'll hand to my fellow panelists. Look, what I'm reading there is that it's being used as evidence potentially negatively in terms of managing employees or potentially holding them back. That's how I'm reading that question. By all means, do correct me if I've got that wrong. Mental health is a protected position. You cannot discriminate on someone based on them having a mental health illness. So I would probably remind your managers of that and let them know that that can get them into a lot of trouble, and encourage them to take some advice. Jamie, do you have a view on that?
Can you read the question to me again, please, Natasha?
It just disappeared.
I have it.
Oh, sorry.
I have it. It's can you please provide your... No, sorry, that's not it. Mental health matters are being evidenced in middle management. How do we broach this respectfully in a hierarchical-based organisations?
So what we have done is we have addressed managing mental health with our managers so that they have the skills themselves to manage their own mental health, but have an appreciation of how to manage it, and knowledge how to manage it within their teams.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Graeme, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, you know, it really takes a long-term campaign to change an organisation. And we've put together something, a book, which is called Building a Mentally Healthy Culture Checklist. And so it starts with how we prepare, how we launch, and how we build momentum. And you can find that, it's a free download from factorc.com.au. And that is also, I can see a question there wanting to know how we get hold of this special with which Natasha mentioned. The best way to do that is at the FactorC website again, factorc.com.au. And the promo code to be used is MH Week. You know, we're a Mental Health Week. The promo code is MH Week.
Great, fantastic. Matthew says comment, which I think is very pertinent. And how, to the end of the question, how are you feeling today? I think that's a very good one. We've got some great feedback in there. I do want to cover off some of Nick's because he's been very active in here. He talks about what do we do if we find someone who's struggling? What are the next steps, Graeme?
I'm sorry, I was reading something. I just didn't.
That's all right. What do we do? What do we actually do if we find someone is struggling? What are the next steps?
Well, it's really following that eye care model that I talked about. You know, you identify them, and the C is for compassion. You know, I think the best thing is to go for a walk if you can, if that's geographically possible. And I've really found walking in nature or park is the best. You're shoulder to shoulder. You're not looking at each other, and to ask the question, but keep on probing for what's going on, because very rarely will the first thing offered be the true solution. And then encourage them to take action, you know, access experts. And it's just often just one thing. Don't make it too hard, make it one thing. And I saw a great comment earlier on when someone is in denial and wanting seeking help. The person said, I've sat with someone while they've called EAP. And I think that's brilliant, because that social support really helps with that scary, for some people, step. And it's a scary step when you're not in a well place.
Yeah. The next question is, how do we support individuals with mental illness to stay well at work? And from my perspective, I think that is around checking in with them regularly to find what support they need. Now, sometimes people who are overwhelmed with anxiety or depression may struggle to let you know what they need. So maybe putting some suggestions out there, but making them feel supported and cared for. Jamie, do you have another view there?
Yeah, very similar, Natasha. Definitely keeping that regular check-ins going, but also making sure that they're still getting access to the things that they like to do that make them feel good, whether it's exercise or socialising with certain friends, whatever it is, just making sure that they're still maintaining and getting on with those things that they enjoy.
Excellent. I'm just having a quick look. Helen said, how do we use WeCare for a boutique team? You can use it for a boutique team. Absolutely. You just buy the licenses that you need, Helen. The great thing of WeCare is it works for all different size organizations. And what I find incredibly powerful about it is that it enables people to very quickly go, oops, I'm very worried about Jamie. I'm going to just jump in and do some training here. It's going to take me 20 minutes. I've got some forms and some pamphlets I can take to my conversation with Jamie. And it gives you the confidence and the facilitation. I think what I'd like everyone to take from this, and Graham's probably got a view on this, is it's a little bit, you know, like when you did your first aid course for the first time and you were worried about pumping someone like this. And they used to say, just have a go. You're going to do less damage by pumping them and breaking a rib than them potentially dying. First aid, mental health first aid and WeCare is a bit the same. You know, it's just about asking the questions, listening non-judgmentally, and, you know, trying to encourage them to get help. Graeme, do you have anything you'd add to that?
The closest thing to a mentally healthy workplace nirvana is prevention and early detection. Yeah. And so prevention is encouraging people to lead a healthy life, and managers can best do that by example. And the second thing, early detection, is exactly what we designed WeCare to do, you know, being able to identify the signs early. The earlier you address it, the faster it will turn around.
I think the other thing I would say there is it's okay to not be okay. I think, you know, we Aussies typically have had that she'll be right, mate kind of attitude. And it's going to take us a little while to get okay with asking that. And I'm going to share a personal story just in terms of trying to illustrate this. My son ended up in hospital after a very horrific sort of vomiting and diarrhea bug where I actually thought he died. He was in my arms and he just went stiff as a board and his eyes lit up. And it really scared the living daylights out of me, but I got on with it, I did it. And now I don't know whether David Brown, who's my GM, is on the call. He said to me, he said, Natasha, I'm going to tell you exactly what you would tell anyone in your team to do, because I started to get a bit emotional. And he said, call your EAP program. And I'm like, you're bloody right, but I hadn't even thought of it. And we all need to debrief, and we all need to note that my brother talks about, he's a GP, and he talks about we're keeping our noses just above water, and sometimes it drops under, and we've just got to make sure that it's all okay for all of us to go and get help at any time. It is not a sign of weakness at the moment. We're all expected to be struggling, to be honest.
Also, this just happened yesterday.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, any other questions that I haven't seen?
I have a couple more that we haven't addressed yet. Okay, we've got Marnie. We have a similar wellbeing strategy, particularly for COVID. What is your secret for uptake to encourage team members to benefit from things like a yoga or movie night?
Jamie.
Yeah, look, that's a really good one. We've tried and tested a lot of initiatives. Some work, some don't, obviously. But it's just, for us, it's been a matter of trial and error.
Okay, and we've got Vashti's question. I don't think that we've answered yet. Just more information about the information on a psychologically safe workplace. Do we know where that information came from, or how can you access more information?
Yeah, there's a large amount of research about this, and one of the best things you can do is to Google a New York Times article. So you put NYT, Google's quest to build the perfect team, and you'll find quite a long article that talks about how they found out what was the best quality of these teams. And they identified 5 team norms. Number 1 was psychological safety. I'll come back to that. Number 2 was dependability. We can rely on each other. Number 3 was clarity. You know, we know what's expected. Number 4 was meaning, that we believe in our work. And number 5 was impact. But by far the most important was team psychological safety. And Google really found that, that the best way to do that is for people to really share what's going on. And in this article, it describes a Google employee who shared with his colleagues, he was the team leader, that he had cancer and he'd been hiding it up till then. And again, it was sharing vulnerability, and that led to a whole different dynamic in the organization. So you have to have that basic care, that basic connection, which, you know, Jamie really talked about how we do that. But in a psychologically safe team, each team member talks approximately equally. It doesn't mean it's a democracy, but everyone has a contribution to make. And the fastest way that Google found to increase team psychological safety was in every weekly meeting, each person shared a risk they'd taken in the past week. So, you know, and I'm not talking about a physical risk, of course, it's a psychological or mental risk. So that gets a whole different dynamic happening in organizations, because risks sometimes work, they sometimes fail. But if you have that mindset that we learn from our failures, you're in the learning zone, and every organization needs to be in the learning zone right now.
Excellent. Caroline, any others?
I don't think we have any other questions. I'm wondering, I'm curious as to whether our audience is all aware about exactly what an EAP is and how it can benefit their organizations. And I think that was about it. Natasha, did you want to briefly discuss that?
An EAP is an employee assistance program. It's effectively 24/7 counselling available to your team. And you can get that set up where your employees can call at any time. You won't know who's called. They keep those details private. But once you have over, I think, 10 employees, they'll give you some details on it. So you'll get a sense of whether it's financial worries or marital worries, partnership worries, and so on. We set those up for clients, or alternatively, you know, the government is providing significant support through Beyond Blue, where Australians can ring up and get some support through that. So that's what an EAP program is. I think every organisation needs to have one, because, you know, people go through ebbs and flows throughout life, not just through COVID.
Thank you. And I don't think we have any other questions.
All right.
There's just one thing there. Some people just commented that the promo code didn't work for them. So I'm just going to share in there my email to everyone here. So if you have any problems, please just email me directly, and yeah, we'll
get that sorted.
Yep.
Don't worry. Okay, that leaves me nothing else other to say thank you, especially to those of you who stayed on right till the bitter end. We hope this has given you enormous value. You know, I think that having these conversations is really important. The more we all know as a collective, the more we can help people become more mentally healthy. Again, I'd like to thank Graeme and Jamie for their excellent presentations. Stay safe, everyone, and remember your employees really do matter, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you. Bye.